Many big games are coming out soon. Silent Hill F, Battlefield 6, Onimusha, Ninja Gaiden 4, Ghost of Yotei, and next year, of course, being the gigantic swearing gun-toting elephant in the room, GTA 6. As a longtime Resident Evil fan, however, Resident Evil 9 is definitely my priority title for 2026, and it is already coming out in February. Capcom really likes releasing their games early in the year, with Monster Hunter Wilds also having a release date of February this year. Now we have seen the teaser and the trailer, as well as the first look of gameplay, especially the demo, during Gamescom 2025. Now what struck me was several things, such as the main character being the daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, who was a playable character from a fan favorite title in the franchise, Resident Evil Outbreak. That, in my opinion, was the perfect Resident Evil multiplayer game if only it released a generation later, when console online multiplayer games were more common and widespread. Another is the fact that it seems that we are going back to their survival horror roots. Now, although it is just a demo, you can already see a few things akin to classic Resident Evil mechanics. Key items are part of your inventory, which means most likely we'll see the return of our longtime partner in the franchise, the item box. Now, this can also mean we'll be doing a lot of backtracking for key items. Alongside the item box, the ink ribbon returns, but it seems you will have to craft ink ribbons, further adding the survival horror elements that the franchise was known for, especially in the legacy titles. Our vitality meter returns. The classic ECG health status is back, so this means we will once again be haunted with the words fine, caution, and danger, and perhaps status ailments. Now, shockingly, as fitting as the title Requiem is, we are returning to Raccoon City, the iconic location that practically is the identity of Resident Evil, and 2026 is also the franchise's 30th anniversary. So it is fitting that we revisit the city that gave its popularity, as Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, while for some is probably not as popular as RE4, those two in particular definitely stood out, especially during the peak era of the PS1, and I firmly believe that Resident Evil 2 and 3 in particular are really what put Resident Evil on the map and basically gave attention to the franchise as a whole. Now, with just these few points, I of course tempered my expectations and hype and saved it for when the game actually does release, but I really cannot help but think, compile, and now share with you 5 things I hope to see and experience in Resident Evil 9. Number 1, Roots. Now, the logo they used during the teaser, in my honest opinion, is very important. In just about every Resident Evil title, it is usually a zombie or enemy that is prominently featured on the cover. Now, RE2, 3, and 1, more so the remake than the original cover in RE1's case, RE7 and RE Village prominently featured a main character or the overarching enemy boss or both. Now, one of the most iconic loading screen quotes directly references the identity of the genre Resident Evil belongs to: enter the survival horror. Alongside that, other memorable quotes such as, "Are those the footsteps of survivors?" or "Fear cannot kill you, but..." These quotes alone, on top of many legacy gameplay features and its idiosyncrasies, really cemented Resident Evil as the genre-defining survival horror game. From the footage of the demo, not to say that there will be no action elements, of course, especially those that were prominent in RE4 to 6 and to some extent Village, but the emphasis really seems to be on survival and horror in particular. Where 7 leaned extremely hard on the horror element, while 4 to 6 leaned harder to action, 9 seems to try and take the balance that Village tried to deliver and take that to the next level as perfectly as possible. Speaking of roots, I would love them to bring back the classic "this game contains scenes of explicit violence and horror" loading screen when you start up the game, as well as the loading screen quotes like the aforementioned ones. It really does help set the tone and immerse you in the horrible world and situation you and your character is in. Number 2, commitment. For the longest time, I believe we have had 3 eras of Resident Evil games. If we primarily focus on the numbered mainline titles, RE0 to 3, which is 4 titles, really focused heavily on survival horror. RE4 to 6, which is 3 titles, diverted to the more popular and trending genre in its time, action. RE7 and 8 attempted to redeem the franchise after overall feedback from 5 and especially 6, and went back to horror. I hope with RE9, Requiem, they commit to something that can consistently carry the identity of the franchise that they envision. Be it survival horror, action survival, action horror, I really want them to stick to one dominant theme and defining trait and play around with that. They can evolve, innovate, and deviate as much as they want, but I would really love them to commit to just one. Another thing is that for the longest run in the franchise, evil science was basically the general catalyst of these horrific events. With RE7 and Village, it started to lean a bit towards the supernatural. While the mold itself does have its scientific experiment and research behind it, the way it is translated into particular boss fights, enemies, it makes it step into the supernatural territory. On one end, you have an Astarion cosplaying as an evil Van Helsing with the power of Magneto, and on the other hand, you also have Evelyn, who would fit quite well into the X-Men with her powers of, let me check my list, hallucination, illusion, telepathy, telekinesis, the list goes on. Now, if RE7 was my first RE game, it would not be strange to me. But as someone who started Resident Evil from 2, and then played all the titles chronologically since then, it is strange to me when the powers of a boss extends beyond their physical form. Wesker in RE5 in particular, his powers are, like I said, it's kind of similar to that of a super soldier, and it's not supernatural to the point where he is controlling like rocks or stuff he can pick up with his mind. He's not giving Chris and Sheva hallucinations, so it is still grounded a little bit in science. Now that for me is the part of the identity I am familiar with and what I attach to Resident Evil, and I do hope they stick with that. If they do want to lean towards the supernatural, this is something that they really do have to commit. Like ideally, I do not want them to go to the supernatural territory and then go back to the scientific territory. I really want them to stick to just one. I think it's difficult when you have played RE0 all the way to Village, and the 2 latest numbered titles, which are 7 and Village, not counting the remakes, were particularly titles that were more supernatural than they were scientific. Number 3, characters. The franchise itself is very known for its very iconic characters, Leon being the most popular male character and Jill being the most popular female character of the franchise. Now there are other popular and iconic characters such as, but not exclusive to, Claire, Rebecca, Barry, Wesker, Ethan, Ada, Nemesis, Mr. X, even Chicken Heart Brad is popular. Now, many not mentioned here are popular within their own title because they quite literally do not exist outside of a cameo or a reference outside their debut title. We haven't heard of Billy, Sheva, Helena, even Jake, while we have been left in this cruel, Carlosless world without knowing if they are alright. The one cameo reference I do remember is Sheva being mentioned to some extent in RE6, I believe, when Pierce was looking for Chris at some point in the story. Now, regardless if they are dead or not, I would love to see at least some closure for these characters. I mean, after all, Billy did teach and help Rebecca break out of her naivety and team up with Billy, despite being an alleged criminal, for the sake of surviving a hellish situation that they are ill prepared for, which honestly I think is one fault of RE1 remake. They did not really, how do I say this, translate Rebecca's experience from 0 into RE1. So if RE1 remake were to have another remake, hopefully they can fix that continuity, I guess. Like, Rebecca survived one game. I think she should not be as much of a rookie, I guess, as they depict her in 1. But then again, that's just my thought and that's just my opinion. Chris, suffering from early stages of PTSD and survivor's guilt because of the overwhelming devastation of stars in the mansion incident and then the Raccoon City incident, save for Rebecca, Barry, Jill, and Wesker until RE5, had to find comfort in Sheva, his latest partner, in Resident Evil 5, while trying to reconcile that part of him that lived and survived with team members and grappling with the part of him that does not want anyone near him to die because of his occupation and how frequently that has happened. Many of these characters for me have a big enough impact that warrants a little bit more screen time from them, and I really genuinely hope we do get closure for some. In every Resident Evil title, we have played more than one character, and if not, we have 2 or more characters to choose from to play. In Resident Evil 1, we do have a choice to play as Chris or Jill. In Resident Evil 2, it's Claire and Leon. In RE3, it's mainly Jill, but there are parts where we play as Carlos. In RE4, we do play as Leon most of the time, but there is an Ashley segment, and there is also, of course, Separate Ways and Assignment Ada. In RE5, we do have a choice to play between Chris and Sheva. In 6, we literally have 4 campaigns, one Ada with a partner. We have Leon partnered up with Helena. We also have Chris with Piers. And of course, Sherry with Jake. In RE7, we do mostly play as Ethan, but there is a section where we do play as Mia. So again, that still counts. And in Village, once again, it's mostly Ethan, but we also do have a Chris segment. So I think that is a tradition that we'll see continue in RE9. And to sort of be not exactly a foil, but to complement the representative, I guess, of the new generation for this title, which is Grace Ashcroft, I hope that the other playable character will be a legacy character. So we have Grace representing the new generation of RE protagonists, so I think it would fit if the second playable character represents the legacy of RE protagonists. So the safest choice obviously would be Leon or Jill, because they are 2 of the most popular characters in the entire franchise. But honestly, I would love to see others like Rebecca, Claire, or Barry, or honestly any of the other characters earlier that I mentioned that got 1 game to their screen time. So Billy, Sheva, Helena, Jake, Sherry, I guess, since she was playable in 6, and to some extent 2 as well. So it would be nice. It would be nice. Number 4, gameplay. The gameplay for Resident Evil has evolved over the years, with some great elements being further evolved, emphasized, while some experimental gameplay features changed, scrapped, added, fixed, tweaked, and innovated. After all, the legacy titles are famous and infamous for its fixed camera angles, tank controls, and RE4 started the whole QTE and stagger into press a button for more damage that we are all too familiar with, even outside Resident Evil. And of course, RE4 did set the golden standard for over-the-shoulder shooters. I believe RE4 is credited quite a lot, and it's believed by a big chunk of the gaming industry and the fan base as the credit for why we have games like Fortnite, Last of Us, Gears of War, shooters or shooters with elements of over the shoulder. It's because of Resident Evil 4. It may sound like an exaggeration, but that is an exaggeration I'm willing to believe because in my honest belief, I really think that is how much impactful RE4 is, not to just the franchise, but to the industry as well. This stagger into press a button gameplay feature is also a very common experience in many games nowadays, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, what I do wish RE9 does is that they highlight things in the older titles that started to lose relevance or get neglected or straight out removed in future titles. Now, ink ribbons returning is one thing that I am glad they are doing, and it seems they are even more of a luxury than they ever were before And with inventory space seemingly very scarce, I really hope they do not treat the typewriter as the item box as well. I hope these two are separated because I recall locations in some games where there are some areas where you have item boxes but no typewriters. And while save rooms do have both, save rooms are a thing, you wouldn't always find both together outside of save rooms. So that is an element of the whole survival horror gameplay loop of Resident Evil that I am very familiar with, and I really do kind of miss backtracking. That is an element for me that defines survival horror, and that's just one of many. Now, I have no clue what kind of combat training Grace has, at least from what the game will show us. We can of course formulate a lot of speculations based on the organization that she works, based on the fact also that her mother is Alyssa Ashcroft, so I'm pretty sure she has taught Grace some survival techniques. 100% she has. But given how her stature is very small, like close to RE0 Rebecca and RE2 Claire levels of small, with Claire, I'm pretty sure Claire is slightly taller and bulkier because of, well, Redfield genes. And while it would be cool to see her do a butterfly kick like Ada or something, I do hope she moves, maneuvers, and tackles combat that is accurate and believable to her character. Now, if Leon, this is a hypothetical, if Leon is our second playable character, I would love to see years of experience, aging, and, tempering translate into how Leon dispatches enemies as well. Now, perhaps he won't do suplexes anymore or full roundhouse kicks, but he'll do simpler and more energy efficient moves, I guess, because it's been years since we've last seen Leon, and Leon has been in, if we're just taking the numbered titles alone, he's been in 3 games already, with each entry tempering Leon a lot. Now, for better or for worse, RE3 Remake gave identity to Jill and Carlos by giving them differences in playstyle, even though it is very slight or very subtle. For example, Carlos's dodge is not as evasive as Jill's because he doesn't travel as far as Jill when he does a perfect dodge, but his shoulder tackle into punch follow-up does knock down enemies, making them easier to, eliminate, or to give him a window of opportunity to run, if you want to use that option. Jill's dodge is more evasive because it does travel further, but it doesn't really give Jill the space to safely engage enemies, especially if it is in a large group. You will mostly be using Jill's dodge to dodge groups of enemies rather than to fight one particular enemy. And obviously, this is more so in harder difficulties where you need to perfect dodge twice more often than not because of how aggressive enemies are and how enemy placements can make perfect dodging very, very tricky. Lastly, if there's one thing I really hope they do execute much more properly, is puzzles. RE0 to RE3 had some of the best puzzles, and puzzles did show signs of deterioration 4 onwards. I mean, I think we all remember the slide puzzle for Ashley in RE4, and even some of the puzzles in the village where I'm like, yeah, the answer to this puzzle, the solution to the puzzle is already in the puzzle itself. Nice. Most puzzles after that were more visual puzzles. Honestly, especially after 3, 4 onwards, the puzzles were mostly visual. RE3 Remake's only puzzle was straight up a joke in comparison to just about any remake or legacy title. I really do hope Requiem has more brain teasers that I absolutely love in this franchise. Number 5. Last but not the least, RE Engine woes. Now, I really need to say this. We are no stranger to Capcom's latest iteration of the RE engine being poorly received because of its myriad performance issues. Dragon's Dogma 2 and Monster Hunter Wilds being their most recent games, and recent big games, mind you, of their 2.0 RE engine. We are literally 0 for 2 for smooth launch releases for these games. Dragon's Dogma 2 showed the RE engine's limitations and performance hiccups, especially when you entered heavily populated areas like large cities. Dragon's Dogma 2 showed the RE engine's limitations and performance hiccups whenever you entered a heavily populated area like a large city. And while large cities are not exactly too many, with a couple of populated towns, villages, when you are fighting hordes of enemies as well, the performance will noticeably drop, but it is much, much worse in a city. We all know the memes of Polygon Hunter Wilds, with NPCs and monsters straight up being more triangle models than 3D models, and even after that was a mess of a performing game even until now, with a review bomb season that started a little bit later after its release, when people expected Capcom to iron out its performance problems, and instead we are still suffering from performance issues until now. Now, I'll give credit where credit is due. It has been getting better, but this is really a problem, a common problem that really saddens me, is a common problem in modern era of gaming, where games launch with questionable performances at best. Worst, it is unplayable, and then they patch it to a playable state. Games should not be releasing in that state in the first place, especially if it's a big company that does release these games. Please. What baffles me about this situation with RE Engine is that this is their engine. It's not a proprietary engine that everyone really loves using, and the all too perfect, no one has complaints whatsoever engine, Unreal Engine, right? It's quite understandable, but still not an excuse if Capcom was releasing their games through Unreal Engine. But this is their engine. They are the ones that are very knowledgeable about it. They know the ins and outs. So why are their latest games suffering these issues? Now, with this in mind, I sincerely hope third time's the charm, because this for me is a serious problem that we really should not ignore. The message we have been sending, be it unintentionally or unconsciously, is that we will buy poor performing Capcom games because Capcom games are just that iconic. Now, I will level with you. It's very difficult to try and send a message when you are trying to send a message by not buying Monster Hunter. Like, try to ask a Monster Hunter fan to not buy the latest Monster Hunter. Not easy. That's like asking a Pokemon fan to don't buy the latest Pokemon game. Not easy. And same goes for me. As a Resident Evil fan, I can very much relate to that. Resident Evil 4 itself was performing okay in most areas, but I am not blind to the fact that in the one area of Resident Evil 4, Chapter 5 in particular, even I remember this specific chapter. This is after you rescue Ashley in the church. When you go back to the main village square where you do the bingo segment, when you encounter Rain in that area, the performance, the frame rate just drops so bad. And gladly, that's the only time, at least for me, that I experienced that performance drop, but it still is what I count as another hiccup, another trip, another failure for RE Engine. Whoop-de-doo. Now, ironically, the one thing they have been waging war against, and when I say they, I am referring to Capcom, they have been waging war against the same thing that has been keeping their games on PC in particular playable or at least relatively smooth. Mods. Now, I want to level with Capcom here. Mods are something that should be optional, 100%. And I do understand that there are some problems that mods can introduce. However, when a performance mod becomes a must or essential for a person to play a game, just play. It doesn't even have to be like 60 FPS 2K resolution. It can just be like bare bones, like 1080p at 30 to 60 frames. Like, if they need a mod, despite them meeting a little above the minimum requirements, that is a problem. And Capcom is waging war against the very thing that is actually allowing people to play their game on PC. That is a problem, Capcom. Now, with these 5 points in mind, these are the main lenses I will be evaluating Requiem. through when it does come out. Now, of course, I will probably be more giddy, I guess, as a Resident Evil fan than critical, but I do genuinely hope my experience for the game is so fun that any hiccups and any stains, right? Any hiccups, any stains in the game are overshadowed by everything else good about the game. Of course, I still won't ignore any things that I have to point out. No game is perfect after all, and honestly, they don't have to be. I just like games to be as fun as they could possibly be and be the best version of the game that the developers envision. Thank you for watching, Foxtrots, and I hope you have a good day.